Renting is throwing money away. You've heard this 1,000 times, maybe from a parent, a relative, or just general advice floating around online. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For a huge number of people in a huge number of situations, that advice is flat out wrong. This isn't a video telling you to rent forever, and it isn't a video telling you buying is always better either. This is the actual math, the actual trade-offs, and the actual factors that determine which choice makes you wealthier, because the honest answer is, it depends, and most people never actually run the numbers to find out. In today's video, we're covering the real cost of owning a home that almost nobody accounts for, the real cost of renting, beyond just the monthly payment, the actual math that determines which option builds more wealth, the non-financial factors that matter just as much as the numbers, and a simple framework you can use to make this decision for your own situation. If breaking down real financial decisions like this is useful to you, make sure you're subscribed to Tom Explain Money. This is exactly the kind of practical breakdown we do every week. Let's get into the real numbers. The hidden costs of buying a home. When people compare renting and buying, they almost always compare monthly rent to a mortgage payment. That comparison alone is deeply misleading, because owning a home comes with a long list of costs that never show up in that simple comparison. Property taxes are an ongoing cost that renters simply don't pay directly, and depending on where you live, this can add thousands of dollars a year on top of the mortgage itself. Maintenance and repairs are a cost that catches almost every new homeowner off guard. A general rule many financial planners use is that you should budget somewhere around 1% of your home's value every year just for maintenance. A $400,000 home might realistically need $4,000 a year in repairs, upkeep, and replacements, and that's before anything unexpected happens. Homeowners insurance is typically more expensive than renter's insurance, since you're insuring the structure itself, not just your belongings. Closing costs, paid when you first purchase, typically run between 2 to 5% of the home's purchase price, money that's essentially gone the moment you buy, regardless of what happens to the home's value afterward. The opportunity cost of your down payment is one of the most overlooked costs of all. If you put $60,000 down on a home, that's $60,000 that isn't invested anywhere else, potentially earning returns in the stock market or elsewhere. Mortgage interest, especially in the early years of a loan, makes up a surprisingly large portion of your monthly payment, meaning a large chunk of what you pay early on isn't actually building equity at all. It's just interest to the lender. When you add all of this up, the true cost of owning a home is often 30 to 50% higher than just the mortgage payment alone. The hidden costs of renting. Renting has its own less obvious costs and trade-offs, even though the monthly bill looks simpler on the surface. Rent increases over time, often outpacing what a fixed-rate mortgage payment would do. A homeowner with a 30-year fixed mortgage has the same principal, an interest payment for 3 decades, while a renter's payment typically rises every year, or every lease renewal. You build no equity. Every rent payment goes entirely to your landlord, with nothing coming back to you in the form of ownership, regardless of how long you stay. You have less control over your living situation. A landlord can choose not to renew your lease, sell the property, or raise the rent significantly, and you have limited ability to prevent any of that. There's an emotional and lifestyle cost too, though it's harder to put a number on. Some renters describe a persistent sense of impermanence, not being able to fully customize or invest in a space they know isn't truly theirs long-term. But renting also comes with real financial advantages that often get ignored. Flexibility has real value. The ability to move for a job opportunity, downsize, or relocate without the cost and hassle of selling a home. No maintenance costs means a renter never has to unexpectedly pay for a new roof, a broken furnace, or a plumbing emergency. That's the landlord's financial risk, not yours. And the money that isn't tied up in a down payment or home equity can be invested elsewhere, which brings us to the actual math. The actual math, running the numbers. Let's build a real, side-by-side example. Scenario, buying. Imagine a $400,000 home with a 10% down payment of $40,000 and a 30-year mortgage at a 6.5% interest rate. The monthly mortgage payment, before taxes and insurance, comes out to roughly $2,275. Add estimated property taxes and insurance, and the total monthly cost lands around $2,800 over the first 10 years. Factoring in typical maintenance costs, closing costs, and interest paid, the total cost of ownership is substantial, and a meaningful portion of those early payments goes toward interest rather than equity. Scenario: renting. Now imagine renting a comparable home for $2,200 a month, with rent increasing 3% annually, a fairly typical, moderate assumption. Over that same 10-year period, total rent paid adds up significantly too, but with no equity building. Here's where it gets interesting. If the renter takes the $40,000 they would have used as a down payment, plus the monthly difference between renting and the total cost of owning, and invests that difference into a diversified investment portfolio, earning a historical average return of around 7 to 8% annually, that invested amount can grow substantially over the same 10-year period. The comparison ultimately comes down to three key variables. Home price appreciation. Historically, home values have appreciated at rates that vary enormously by location, sometimes below inflation, sometimes well above it. Investment returns on the money not spent on a down payment. If invested consistently, this can compound significantly over the same time period. How long you stay in the home. The longer you stay, the more the large upfront costs of buying get spread out, generally making ownership more favorable the longer the time horizon. The honest conclusion from the math: in high appreciation markets, or when someone stays in a home for 10 plus years, buying often comes out ahead. In markets with slower appreciation, or for someone who might move within 3 to 5 years, renting and investing the difference frequently produces comparable, or even better financial outcomes, the opposite of what most people assume. The break-even concept. One of the most useful frameworks in this entire decision is something called the break-even point. The number of years you need to stay in a home before buying becomes financially better than renting. This break-even point exists because of all those upfront costs we covered earlier: closing costs, the down payments, opportunity costs, and the early years of a mortgage where you're paying mostly interest. In the first few years of homeownership, renting is almost always financially better, purely because those large upfront costs haven't been offset yet by building equity or benefiting from appreciation. As a general pattern, many financial analysts point to somewhere around 5 to 7 years as a common break-even range, though this varies enormously depending on your specific mortgage rate, local property tax rates, home price trends in your area, and how rent prices are moving in that same market. This is why the most common piece of financial advice around this topic isn't always buy or always rent. It's know your time horizon. Someone who's confident they'll stay in one place for a decade or more is in a very different financial position than someone who might relocate for a job in 2 or 3 years. If you're finding this kind of practical framework useful, now's a great time to hit subscribe. We break down decisions like this with real numbers every week. Non-financial factors that matter just as much. Here's something the purely mathematical comparisons often miss. This decision isn't only about which option produces a bigger number on a spreadsheet. Stability for families matters enormously for people with children in school, where moving disrupts routines, friendships, and education in ways that are hard to quantify financially. Career flexibility matters just as much in the other direction. Someone in an early career stage, or in an industry where relocating for opportunities is common, often benefits from the flexibility renting provides, even if the raw math slightly favors buying. Personal fulfillment and control is real, even if it doesn't show up in a financial model. Being able to renovate, paint, landscape, or genuinely make a space your own has value that many homeowners describe as meaningful, separate entirely from the investment return. Maintenance responsibility is a lifestyle factor as much as a financial one. Some people genuinely enjoy home projects and repairs, while others find the responsibility stressful and would rather call a landlord than fix things themselves. Market timing and local conditions matter too. The same decision can have a completely different answer in a high-cost, slow appreciation city compared to a lower-cost, high-growth area, which is why generic national advice on this topic is often misleading. A simple framework for your own decision. Rather than relying on generic advice, here's a practical framework you can actually apply to your own situation. Step 1. Calculate your true monthly cost of owning, including estimated property taxes, insurance, and a realistic maintenance budget, not just the mortgage payment alone. Step 2. Compare that to actual rental listings for a similar home in the same area, not an outdated number from memory. Step 3. Estimate your realistic time horizon. Be honest about how long you're actually likely to stay. Job stability, family plans, and local market interest all factor in here. Step 4. Consider what you do with the money you're not using as a down payment. If you chose to rent instead, would it realistically get invested consistently, or would it likely just get spent? Step 5. Weigh the non-financial factors honestly. Stability needs, how much you value control over your space, and your tolerance for maintenance responsibilities. Step 6. Run the numbers for your specific time horizon, rather than relying on a generic national statistic, since local property appreciation and rent trends vary enormously by city, and even by neighborhood. There's no universal right answer here. The honest, slightly unsatisfying truth is that the right choice depends entirely on your specific numbers, your specific market, and your specific life situation. Common mistakes people make in this decision. 1. Buying primarily because renting feels like a waste. This emotional framing often leads people to buy before they're financially ready, ignoring maintenance costs and the risk of needing to move sooner than expected. 2. Assuming home prices always go up. Historical appreciation varies enormously by market and time period, and treating it as guaranteed leads to overly optimistic math. 3. Ignoring the opportunity cost of a down payment. Many people compare mortgage payment to rent, without ever considering what that down payment could have earned if invested elsewhere. 4. Underestimating maintenance costs. New homeowners are frequently surprised by unexpected repair costs that weren't budgeted for at all. 5. Not accounting for how long they'll actually stay. Buying with a 3-year plan in a market with a 7-year break-even point often turns out to be a costly decision in hindsight. So, renting versus buying, which one actually makes you richer? The honest answer is, it depends entirely on your time horizon, your local market, and what you'd actually do with the money if you chose the other path. Neither option is universally smarter. The real financial mistake isn't choosing renting or buying, it's making that choice emotionally, without ever running the actual numbers for your specific situation. If this breakdown helped you think about this decision more clearly, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Tom Explain Money. We break down exactly this kind of practical, numbers-driven financial decision every week. Drop a comment below. Are you currently renting or buying? And what tipped the decision for you? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.